Howdy fellas, I just want to talk about some trailers and how one of them does a great job at being a trailer and how one of them not so great. Referring to what we saw in the direct for Pikmin 4 and Tears of the Kingdom, I wasn't sure if I should even bring up my thoughts on the Zelda trailer, as that could be its own video, and I really just want to highlight what a good trailer Pikmin got, honestly. And generally, I'd like to lean more strictly positive in this video, but I feel like it actually really helps push my point, because what Breath of the Wild 2 got is kind of the polar opposite of what's got me so excited for what was shown of Pikmin 4. But what exactly was shown? Well, in Pikmin's case, we're seeing a lot more man-made objects, that much was clear in just the initial teaser, really playing into the idea that this planet takes place in a post-apocalyptic Earth, which was always the case, but it wasn't really super important to the world design until now for the most part, at least not to this extent. They showed collecting overworld treasures, ice Pikmin which can freeze enemies if eaten, and freeze entire bodies of water, allowing you to safely walk over it. And a surprise announcement was this goofy looking dog character who can be used as a flotation device, rideable not only in water but in combat, can drag things and be commanded just like a Pikmin. They showed 4 captains, caves returning with some returning enemies and some new ones of course, and at the very end of it shows a Bulborb going sicko mode, release date drop, right after my birthday. I'm pogging. Alright, but what did Breath of the Wild 2 just get? Well, I think it's important to bring up this is not the first trailer for this game. Not even the second. One could even say it's the 4th time we've gotten to see this game now. And in this trailer we see new flying enemy. It seems to take place in the same game world as the first game, with so many shots showing iconic landmarks from the first game. A couple other new enemies are thrown in, but are for some reason not given as much focus as the enemies the first game already copy-pasted everywhere. A homing arrow will be in this game. A new way to throw bombs will be in this game. Your powers come from Link's hand instead of his phone. And the thing the trailer really pushes is that vehicles will be a central focus, a major way to get around this time. Now, I really don't know how much of a hot take this is, but for Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like I haven't even seen anything yet. And to be fair, I felt this very same thing for the original game. I was super worried about the new direction, even though I agreed it was kind of necessary after Skyward Sword. But ultimately my worry was, even if I did end up pleasantly surprised by Breath of the Wild, it would be hard to see the future of where the series could go. Like, they can't just go back to the old style, right? We're just gonna get a new open world thing every time. Well, thankfully I did end up being surprised by the original game, and excitingly, despite that, there is a lot of potential room for a sequel to blow it out of the water. And the first trailer we got actually starts off interesting, as the tone and aesthetic is in direct contrast with the first game's serene focus on nature. This one's coming off like it's going for a lot more of a creepy, unsettling tone. And that's really cool. We don't really get much else from the first trailer, but it does a good job at introducing the game. But my problem is with every trailer afterwards, which I gotta say just makes the game come off like a cheap asset flip with a couple of tweaked mechanics. But surely it's not just a cheap asset flip. This game took 6 years to make. They've got to be holding out on us, not wanting to spoil anything. And if that ends up being the case, and I'm surprised by the Breath of the Wild era of the series for a second time, I'll be the first one to come babble about how cool the game is. But as far as this video is concerned, I gotta talk about how underwhelming the trailers this game gets are. Going back to Pikmin, the world looks so much different than every game before it. They really show a great sense of scale here. Check this out, when they use an old existing enemy in this trailer, they do it specifically to show off the new mechanics. They show you something new like the Ice Pikmin, and show just a few of the implications of this Pikmin being added to the formula, by showing you how they interact with what's essentially the Goomba of Pikmin. This approach to showing off new things immediately makes new ideas easy to understand, and so fun to think about all the other different things they can do with it. They introduce something, sell you on it, and then leaving you excitedly theorizing about what the bigger picture of the game looks like afterwards. The dog is the most odd addition, getting a lot of focus in this trailer, and I'm sure some people will be put off by him, but I don't know, they do a good job showing that he's so integral to the game without making it look like he's going to completely take over and dilute the focus of it all, because as they're showing you things the dog can do, they're casually confirming caves from Pikmin 2 are back. Again, they're not going, "Caves are back, guys," as some major reveal. It's old content. The focus is explicitly on the dog. And even when they get more blatant about the case for the people who didn't quite pick up on it, they still heavily feature the dog, showing how you can ride it even in combat, whereas before they showed floating on water and sniffing around the caves, propping up the dog as a well thought out, interesting addition to the game, while at the same time giving some cool fan service to Pikmin 2 fans by bringing back this meaty grub of a boss fight, and more importantly, the caves in general. And the big ending implies perhaps you'll be able to explore the landscape on the surface at nighttime. And seriously, for years I have been thinking about how cool it could be to explore Pikmin at nighttime, and by nature of how much that could change the game compared to previous ones, there's just so much you can theorize as to how they're going to make that work exactly, how they're going to pull it off, and that's so exciting. Now, backing up, personally, I kind of find the return of caves a tad bit concerning. They really took over the second game, and while I like Pikmin 2, I'd really rather Pikmin 4 not just be Pikmin 2 2, especially because a big part of the appeal of Pikmin is the time-sensitive gameplay. Games with a big focus on real-time mechanics tend to be some of my favorites, but weirdly time does not pass in Pikmin 2 caves. You can enter one at noon, spend an hour going through 8 floors, come out, still noon. To me, they kind of feel a little disconnected from the Pikmin formula in a lot of ways. But I'm not too worried, as they showed a lot of content outside of the caves, and getting into pure speculation, what if time doesn't stop while you're in the caves this time? You can explore at night now, after all, hence it doesn't really matter if caves end up lasting so long that the day passes. That was the problem before. The caves were so substantial they flat out just didn't fit with the existing formula. But if they're able to make the caves coexist with the outside world, that would be so cool. To make this work, I imagine they'd have to make some way to force you to return to base at some point. But what if instead of your entire game plan revolving around getting as much done in a single day as possible before it cuts you off, instead you play as one captain at a time, and it's more about going until that captain is exhausted. Your character needs to sleep. This isn't one of those games where your character just doesn't need sleep ever. Olimar goes into space not just to get away from the dangerous nighttime monsters, after all. He does it to write in his journal and get some sleep. At the end here, it shows one of your captains going into a pod and going into space, while the other 3 stay behind. Zooming out, it shows that there's a full ship still at base. What if this is just a rest pod? Interestingly, she takes the dog too, perhaps hinting at how the dog is balanced in that he also needs to rest. I don't know, the game's just looking great. Even if this is all just speculation, I'm completely wrong about everything. The trailer did its job in getting me excited to see how it's all gonna work. Phenomenal trailer, very happy with it. It never relies on old content, instead choosing to show how the new ideas recontextualize old content. And it just shows enough new stuff without going too far into it that it gets fans speculating, you know? That's the cool part of trailers. And going back to Zelda, obviously it would be stupid to say the trailer failed to get people excited or speculate. People are absolutely doing that in the same way I just did for Pikmin 4, I'm sure. But for me, despite having like 7 minutes of footage of this game at this point now, with a release date in just a few short months, I'm just not getting anything from these trailers. Again, I'm not trying to doom and gloom and say the game will be underwhelming, I'm just saying these trailers aren't doing it for me. Not helping is how naturally everyone is excited for the last major reveal at the end of every Nintendo Direct, only to get yet another Breath of the Wild 2 trailer where they just show Link running around the same world from the first game, showing the same bokoblins and lizard lads the first game already overused, the same mini-boss fights, the same visual language as the first all around. Literally the only thing I could latch onto with this game is that at some points it really implies a creepier tone and world. If that's what they really lean into, it could be really cool. But whenever they show the game, it's just kind of a sizzle reel of showing recycled content. And most new things feel like slight retoolings of old content that don't really incite much interest out of me. The first trailer made me wonder if there was going to be a whole new map. I'd love for them to take what they learned with Breath of the Wild and try to apply it to the old 3D Zelda formula, meeting somewhere in the middle to have more memorable iconic locations and intricately designed dungeons like before, but using Breath of the Wild's structure to avoid the pitfalls that old 3D Zelda games sometimes fell into. Where Pikmin 4 plays with the idea of a lot of fans were kicking around thinking about nighttime exploration and all the implications of that, the Zelda trailers now are falling in line with my initial worry for the game even existing, and that it's feeling like I'm looking at DLC for the original game, not a proper Zelda sequel that took 6 years to make. We see a very limited number of new enemies, most prominently this flying guy, Seems like the redeads of some sort are coming back, maybe, which I'm pretty hyped for actually, but for some reason it's immediately pushed aside to show the lizards from the first game again. A lot of this trailer just seems to be hammering in that it's going to be the same world as the first game, not really doing a whole lot to recontextualize it in any meaningful way. What are the exciting implications of being able to use this stick to throw your bombs at the same rock monster from the first game you already fought 40 times? It's like they just found some roundabout way to make simply throwing your bomb at an enemy weak to bombs look a little different. Like the game's trying to justify its existence despite not having anything new to offer. A good sequel trailer, as I went over, gets you excited to see how old ideas are updated and changed by new ideas. What's the exciting new idea of being able to fight the same rock monster from the first game in the same way, but instead of throwing the bomb at it, you throw a bomb at it with a bomb stick? Or then there's this homing arrow, which means nothing to me. Like, what little genuinely new is shown here feels like the bare minimum. Like, genuinely look at this new creature and tell me it's going to be an iconic enemy. Like, no, this guy's not going to be added to the iconic Zelda enemy rap.
Those creatures from Ganon are pretty bad. Octoroks, Tektites, Levers too.
Now, to be fair, the focus on vehicles here does potentially recontextualize the game exactly how I'm looking for in a way, but one, that's still not new. We were literally driving a motorcycle across this same landscape in the DLC for the previous game. And two, not sure a Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts looking car is really going to be a major game changer, but it is the most interesting thing, as the nuts and bolts comparison may be pretty accurate. They show Link finding and pulling out what looks like a wheel. This kind of does make me excited that it actually is going to have a vehicle creator using all the pieces you find, not only giving you something really cool to find while exploring, but also something that directly makes exploring more fun, since you're trying to make better and better vehicles. So I'll give it that. As someone who's actually really a big fan of Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, the idea of a Zelda game having that formula does have me kind of interested. And hey, maybe the Minecraft block man is actually composed of vehicle pieces and you can use them after you destroy him or something, and there will be a lot of alternate versions of him using different pieces. That said, a new collectible and a way to move around the world isn't exactly where my wish list ends when I think new mainline Zelda game. I think they were banking on the voice lines to carry the trailer more, I think. I was already against them adding voice acting to this series to begin with. It was tolerable for the original game despite my objections, but the longer the Breath of the Wild world is used, the more I'm really getting tired of how the voice acting is used. I could go into more detail here, but I don't want to derail the video. I'll likely make a Breath of the Wild's world and story and characters into its own video type thing. But when I think exciting new Zelda trailer, I don't think of try-hard one-liners trying to force an emotion onto you like a cheesy movie. Going,
"Oh, but Link, I'm not sure you'll be able to stop him this time,"
as he stands there stoically waiting for the music to drop. And like, genuinely curious, am I being like too jaded about this? Or is it not just me? Like, the voice acting is trying way too hard, right? And same with the beginning narration, which is presumably, of course, Ganondorf. I feel like I see everyone else being like, yo, first time hearing Ganon talk? Crazy. I'm just like, okay, well, this is now the least threatening Ganondorf has ever sounded in the history of this entire franchise. Anyway, sorry, I know that's not like explicitly just analyzing the trailer and just getting into my own personal gripes, but I don't want to come off too negative towards this game either. Like, I'm genuinely trying here, but they're really highlighting a lot of the same enemies from the first game, but ooh, now they've got funny little spiky hats on. If I was to really try and go game explain analysis mode, these hand things that pop up around Link here make me think of those weird things in Wind Waker that grab you and start slurping up your magic. It makes me wonder if this game has a magic meter and perhaps is tied to your hand powers or something. Like, I'd be hyped to see a return of the magic meter for sure, and there's a lot of room to really utilize it in the Breath of the Wild style. More so than the previous games ever did, actually. Like, the game's not hopeless at all. I don't want to give that impression. This could easily end up being phenomenal. The weak trailers could very likely even be intentional. They don't want to share the game's secrets. That said, if they can't put a 2-minute long video trailer together without spoiling the entire game, that makes me worry that the things they're adding aren't going to be fundamentally substantial enough to make the game feel like anything more than an expansion of the first game. Anyway, I think I've babbled long enough about it. Thanks so much for watching. I'm actually very excited for both games and hope they both do well. Though thinking about it a bit more, I'm suddenly worried Zelda will overshadow Pikmin 4. Being only separated by a couple months, Metroid got its time to shine, with Nintendo finally ignoring Zelda's anniversary to celebrate Metroid for a while this time. And with Prime Remake shadow dropping during the Direct, it's great to see a series that really needed it get a push to get out of Zelda's shadow. Shame that we're finally getting Pikmin 4 and it's coming out right after Breath of the Wild 2. Like, bruh, Pikmin fans have waited even longer for their game. Dude, that's the thing even. Despite the longer build-up to Pikmin 4, I feel like they're actually taking advantage of that dev time by really playing with how they can continue growing the Pikmin formula. Like, I'm already seeing where all that dev time could have possibly gone to, and it's really exciting. And Breath of the Wild 2 is, while it's not quite as long, it still has a very long dev time for a game that's one, on the same console, and two, using a lot of the same mechanics and engines and assets and everything. You know, I'm just not seeing where all that time has been put just yet, and I hope I will see that when it's out. But that said, of course, trailers aren't everything. I just wanted to analyze the two to highlight the strengths and weaknesses of how some of my favorite Nintendo franchises are being shown off recently. And I hope you have a swell day. Subscribe to see videos of me begging on my knees for you to support the Pikmin series.